Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And we're quickly approaching the 2-year mark for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, which also means 2 years of supply issues. Truly, it's really been a crazy generation with all of these different problems, and all the while, us as a community, we've just kind of continued to hope that this problem will improve sooner rather than later. Well, about that actually. Instead of improvement, it now looks like this issue is actually expanded as Xbox is dealing with an entirely new problem. Yeah, definitely unfortunate to say the least, but we'll talk about all of that a little later on today, as well as an upcoming Sony event and a new announcement from Nintendo as they announced a new expansion. So we do actually have a lot to cover today, and with that, let's just go and dive right into the news, starting off with Final Fantasy XVI. We are coming off some fresh new details for the highly anticipated Final Fantasy XVI, as the producer Yoshida in an interview revealed quite a bit on how Final Fantasy XVI works. Now, I'll drop a link in the description below, that way you can kind of just sift through the entire article, as he really did drop a lot of information here, but I do want to go over some of the main highlights of what he had to say here. The first of which is that it's becoming more and more obvious that this game is going to have a more mature tone to it than maybe some of the previous Final Fantasy entries. It was revealed here that Final Fantasy XVI will have a mature rating, and that's actually the first time that we've seen a mainline Final Fantasy game receive a mature rating. So do absolutely expect more gore in this game, which I think was already kind of evident from some of the previous trailers, but also expect some heavy themes in it as well. For that matter, you'll be following Clive, the protagonist, in 3 stages of his life, being his teens, his 20s, as well as his 30s. I actually like this approach because you can wrap some really interesting and neat storytelling ideas in a journey like that. But again, with him being an adult in portions of this game, it kind of leans into the idea of having this more adult-like theme to it. Now, a couple of other interesting things from this article, though, was that it does appear that Clive is the only playable character, though you do have AI-controlled party members as well. And then it also was revealed that 16 will not be an open-world game. Instead, how it's going to work here is that they're going to focus on larger zones, which outside of Final Fantasy XV, that's typically how this franchise has worked in the past. When I hear that they're incorporating larger zones, though, I kind of think about games like Pokemon Legends Arceus. You also have Xenoblade as an example. Both of those games, they do have those big open-ended areas that you can explore, and even though they're technically not really open-world games per se, they do still share similarities. And that's kind of what it sounds like what they're trying to do here with Final Fantasy XVI. Maybe something a little bit more similar to maybe, again, Xenoblade as an example. To me, though, I think that it actually sounds really good, and I think that zones could be a good way of handling things such as its story as well as its progression. Let me know what you all think about this, though. Do you like what you're hearing with Final Fantasy XVI so far? I know that I personally do, and I'm really actually very excited to see this more mature-based mainline Final Fantasy entry, again, sometime in the summer of 2023. Now, we also got a new Sega game announcement today that was surprising, I think. I don't really think a lot of people were expecting this, and in fact, yesterday, IGN, they started to tease a Sega World premiere, and they did this by releasing this really short audio clip. Now, in retrospect, it does make sense, but at the time that the soundbite was released, it kind of sounded like it could possibly be a dolphin. Now, Sega, they do have Echo the Dolphin, so there was a lot of speculation that Sega could possibly be bringing back a new Echo the Dolphin, but that actually was not the case at all. Instead, that tease was actually for their new game, Hyenas. Hyenas is being developed by Creative Assembly, which is a very good studio that's worked on games like Alien Isolation. They've worked on Total Wars. They've also worked on Halo Wars 2. And the list just kind of goes on and on. But Hyenas is quite a bit different than some of their past work, as this is a stylized multiplayer shooter where your goal is to steal more pop culture artifacts than the opposing teams. There's actually a total of 5 teams made up of parties of 3. Now, I will say that the overall premise, it does seem kind of interesting depending on if you want a live service game. I mean, we already have a lot of these live service games in the market, so, I guess we'll kind of see if they can separate themselves from the competition, or if this will be just yet another one of the many failures that we've seen as publishers try to chase this trend for live service games and having their own cash cow. As for Hyenas, though, its biggest problem as of this moment really just kind of comes down to the simple fact that this is a new IP with 0 gameplay shown so far. It's kind of hard for fans to get hyped up for a brand new IP when 0 gameplay is shown, so I guess we'll just have to kind of wait to hear more. Now, let's go and talk about Sony, though, because there's been a lot of speculation of another PlayStation State of Play for the month of June. Now, the main reason for this speculation is because some different leaks has pegged PlayStation to make several announcements around the end of June. Most notably, a God of War Ragnarok release date, and then some new hardware is supposedly going to be revealed. Well, it does appear that some new hardware will be unveiled after all, though not at State of Play as many were speculating. Instead, Sony has a live stream set for June 29th, and as you can see from their thumbnail, it says, "Find your new zone." Now, that right there is interesting because, as we talked about just yesterday, Sony has an upcoming line of new gaming headsets by the name of InZone. So this does kind of seem like they might possibly be hinting at that. Now, they could also reveal some other rumored hardware here, such as some different gaming monitors that are supposedly perfect for the PlayStation 5. There's also that rumor going around of a PlayStation 5 Pro DualSense controller, though according to Tom Henderson, that won't be announced here. And he actually adds that they're planning to announce a Sony Valorant partnership, though Valorant still won't actually be available for the PlayStation 5 itself. So, there you have it. There's nothing necessarily definitive about this announcement per se, but at the same time, I think that another June State of Play just became a little more unlikely. I mean, they could still announce a God of War Ragnarok release date even if they don't have a State of Play, but as I continue to say, don't necessarily rule out the idea of them doing that in just a simple blog post or through a release date trailer. I mean, they could do a God of War Direct, I could see them doing something like that, but it's hard to say exactly how they'll announce its release date if they do indeed intend on making an announcement this June. It could be a number of different ways, so don't get your hopes up for this hypothetical State of Play. If it happens, absolutely fantastic, but if it doesn't, at least you didn't get your hopes up too much. Moving on though, Xbox seems to be facing a whole new problem now. Of course, all generation long, we've been dealing with these chip shortages, especially with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. You know, these consoles, they still sell out to this day, which is absolutely crazy to think about. I mean, we're approaching that 2-year mark here sometime soon, this November in fact, actually, and neither one of these consoles have met that initial demand yet, in large part because, well, they can't stock these consoles fast enough due to manufacturing problems. Now, we have seen some improvement with the Xbox Series here recently, which is nice to see. It's not selling out quite as fast as what it used to, but now it looks like Xbox is facing an entirely brand new problem, and that's with its controllers. As you can see here in a report by Video Game Chronicles, it states that Microsoft has acknowledged a shortage of Xbox controllers after many major retailers sold out completely this month. So, we've already gotten a confirmation that this is a legitimate issue from Microsoft themselves. You can actually take a look at their official statement made here. We know it may be hard finding Xbox wireless controllers right now due to supply disruptions. We're working as fast as possible with our manufacturing and retail partners to improve this. Please check with your local retailer for availability. So there you have it from Microsoft themselves, and kudos to the Video Game Chronicles for investigating the matter and getting this report out there. They do just such a great job over there at VGC, and I really want to applaud them for that, but this was more or less a direct response of fans starting to notice how scarce these controllers are starting to become. It does seem like certain regions, they're being a little bit more heavily impacted by this, especially over in Europe. Big retailers in the UK such as Game, Smiths, Currys, and even the official Microsoft store itself are all completely out of stock. Other regions seem to be having some very similar problems though, as well as Australia, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, Denmark, and Sweden. They were all mentioned by fans having this exact same issue. So this does seem to be a pretty widespread problem, and now you can just kind of add another problem for this generation of consoles. Even the peripherals are now being affected, and the timing of all of this is just so unfortunate as well, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge being a big hit. I'm sure a lot of fans out there would love to play this game cooperatively with their family or friends, but a problem like this, I mean, it can kind of keep that from happening. Now, if there's any silver lining though, one good thing about the Xbox Series is that you can still use Xbox One controllers to play games. Sure, the Xbox Series controllers are more refined, and I mean, they're just better overall controllers, especially with its D-pad. but Xbox One controllers, they still work just fine. So hopefully fans can kind of track one of those down if they are having problems finding one of the newer controllers. There's also the Xbox Design Lab where you can create your own controller, and reportedly that is still up and running, though it's like 28 days of wait time. So there's a little bit of wait on those, but let me know in the comments below on if you're having issues finding a new Xbox controller in your region as well. Now, Nintendo also had that Xenoblade 3 Direct today, and I think that if you are a Xenoblade fan, this event will have certainly got you pretty hyped up. It genuinely looks like a fantastic game. They did go over some of the different story beats as well as its combat, which is where I think that it's taking its biggest step forward. There's a lot of customization with its combat, as you can kind of mix and match different jobs and classes, which I absolutely adore in these type of games. I've said it before, but Bravely Default is probably my favorite combat in any single-player JRPG ever made, because of how its class-based customization works. Now, I'm not saying that Xenoblade works exactly like Bravely Default or anything like that, but there were definitely some interesting ideas that they showed here. As your characters, they aren't just locked into that single class, and you can also master certain abilities that can transfer to other classes as well. It all looks really good, and I'm really excited to check out the combat in Xenoblade 3 for myself. The big news here, though, actually comes down to them announcing an expansion pass. Yep, they already announced an expansion pass that'll cost $30 and includes helpful items, different cosmetics, etc., but most importantly, it includes a brand new story scenario that will release by December 31st of 2023. Now, this actually isn't a major shocker for the Xenoblade franchise, as they've had some pretty lengthy story expansions for their first two mainline games in the franchise. But they're getting ahead of things just a little bit here, as they're already confirming it before Xenoblade 3 has even released. I can't really speak for everybody here, but what I'll just kind of say for myself is that I'm not really a huge fan of expansion passes. I'd rather wait to see exactly what I'm going to get when it eventually releases, but hey, that's just me. The thing is that we're in a world of gaming where expansion passes, they are becoming more and more common. And yes, that does include Nintendo getting a little bit more cozy with this idea as well. Regardless on how I feel about expansion passes, though, Xenoblade 3, it really does look like it's going to be a great game, and I'm very excited to play it next month when it releases on July 29th. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, do you think that there will be another PlayStation State of Play for the month of June? And most of you all, being 74% of you, said no, you're not expecting it to happen. 17% of you all, though, did say yes, but the large majority here is definitely looking beyond June, and I think that I'm with you all on this one. Now, I could be wrong here, but I tend to believe their big PlayStation State of Play will actually be this September. That's what they did last year, and multiple leaks have kind of pointed to September as well. Like I said before, though, God of War Ragnarok, it could get its release date before that, maybe even this month, as is rumored right now, actually, but I don't think that necessarily has to happen in a PlayStation State of Play. At least not a general state of play, but I guess we'll just kind of see what happens from here on out. I would say that Sony is unpredictable anymore, and much like Nintendo, they could announce a new event any day now. They could do that a day or two ahead of time and then just drop it out of nowhere. So I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see what happens. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.